They say an actor is only as good as their parts. Well, my parts have done me pretty well, darling. That is a quote from Barbara Windsor, who sadly died on the 10th of December 2020. And we'll be remembering her today on this special episode of Walford Weekly. We'll be remembering her time on the soap where she played Peggy Mitchell. Helping me remember, we've got Rob on the show. Hi, Rob.
Hello, Alex. How are you today?
I'm fine. I mean, very sad, awful
Yes.
news. It's come as such a surprise to me, this morning, waking up to this news.
God, she was amazing. Barbara Windsor. There's so many things that, so many people would say about Barbara, and, we are but just a small little podcast about EastEnders, but we remember Barbara so well for the unforgettable Peggy Mitchell, and just the amount of classic clips that play from EastEnders over the years, every time that there's an anniversary show or anything like that, and most of the clips involve Peggy in some way. Her heartbreaking performances when she was battling cancer in the 90s, to the hilarious scenes of her constant rows and drunken misdemeanours with Pats, and and of course the voice of one of the most well-known catchphrases in British television, "Get out of my pub." Iconic. It's a word that gets chucked around far too often, especially these days, but I think it's one that is truly fitting of Barbara Windsor. She was iconic, a British icon.
I've been listening to some interviews on the radio today by celebrities, and one of the quotes I heard from someone said that when Barbara Windsor walked into a room, she truly lit it up. She was a true star, and a real aura would follow her everywhere she went. I mean, so many nice stories that I've been reading on social media as well about how she was so supportive to the cast, to the crew of EastEnders. She would fight tooth and nail for anyone who she truly believed needed to be stood up for, to the production crew, to the producers. She was great friends with Dominic Treadwell-Collins. As we know, she asked him to do her final scenes of EastEnders, which he did duly, and it's a wonderful moment, which I'm sure we'll discuss in a moment, amongst other moments that we're going to discuss today about her time on EastEnders. We mustn't forget that Barbara Windsor was also a true star in theatre, on screen, truly remembered for her Carry On films, but I think it's unfair to just remember her for those, because she won awards for her roles on Broadway and in London. She is just a truly wonderful actress, and to have her on EastEnders, on such a big iconic soap in the 90s, at the time it was, still pulling in huge audiences, and to have her come on playing Peggy Mitchell, not the original Peggy Mitchell, which I'm sure a lot of the fans and the listeners know. She was the second iteration of Peggy Mitchell, but a lot of the public, a lot of the press really, and herself, were really worried that she wouldn't be able to pull off such a role. But by God, she pulled off that role big time. She really made it her own.
I mean, we're talking about a lady whose overall career lasted probably over 70 years in different guises. And it was a risk, I think. She's spoken about this many times, that it was a risk when she first came in to cast someone who was still a very well-known face, thanks to the Carry On films, that had started to affect her career slightly. She's been quite open. She was quite open about that. And so for her to come in as the face of the Mitchell matriarch, and for her to come in and just give the performances that she did, it was a true opportunity for her. And she was in there was no arrogance about her in that way. Barbara was as nervous and as scared as anybody else would be going into EastEnders at the time, because she knew how important it was. The producers saw the amazing performance she was given, knew that they instantly had an incredible character that they needed to keep hold of for as long as they possibly could. And so Peggy Mitchell became the landlady of the Queen Vic for the longest time that anyone's been landlady. And what a time and era of EastEnders that was.
It really was. She started in EastEnders in 1994. She was on the show on and off for just over 20 years. I mean, that's outstanding in itself.
It is.
And as you say, she was the landlady of the Queen Vic for pretty much most of that part. And she was the matriarch of the square as well. She was just completely wonderful to watch on screen. Her chemistry with pretty much all the cast was fantastic. I mean, before we talk then about some of your favourite parts or some of your favourite stories that she was involved in, I was asked today on the radio, do you think Peggy Mitchell is the number one character of EastEnders? And I sat and I really had to think about that then. I thought, is Peggy Mitchell number one? Because there's been so many big characters. There's been Pat, there's been Pauline, there's been Arthur, there's Sharon, there's Phil, there's so many. And would you put her on that pedestal? Would you say that Peggy Mitchell was the number one? Do you think she is the star that turned the show?
I mean, I think that Peggy was a massive part in how popular EastEnders was in the 90s, especially when she came and made the Mitchells, the triangle of Grant and Phil and Peggy, along with Sam, were a true force to be reckoned with on screen. Everybody thinks of iconic soap families, and the Mitchells are always top of the game, and that is in no small part thanks to Peggy. I don't think that Barbara would ever have said that Peggy was the number one soap character, because I think she had the attitude that no character is bigger than EastEnders, because
You're
EastEnders
right.
is the true character. And we as fans of EastEnders can say how iconic Peggy was, how incredible Peggy was, and we'd be right in saying that, because everybody knows Peggy Mitchell. Even people that don't watch EastEnders know Peggy Mitchell and know some of her storylines. But yeah, I mean, for us, Peggy will never be forgotten, and she was an incredible character that I think helped guide EastEnders into some of the most incredible places that British soap has ever gone to. Just purely, not necessarily because of some of the storylines, but just the tone of the show, and just giving it such a incredible presence on screen. Barbara Windsor walks on screen, you're watching.
Yeah.
The way that she delivered her lines, the way that Peggy Mitchell felt like a real person. I know Peggy Mitchells. And you watch soaps and you say, oh, I know that character. Oh, I've got a character like that. But you can't have that feeling about a character unless the actor is right. Barbara Windsor made Peggy such a relatable character in so many ways that it was impossible not to watch her and think of people that you knew that were like Peggy. Yeah, it's a really, really sad day for, I think, British television and the arts industry today.
It's a horrible thing to talk about this, but we must rekindle her memory and remember our favourite, most memorable parts about her career on screen. And let's start with her very first story, let's just say, on EastEnders, and that's when she was introduced. Phil had just been thrown down the pit because Sharon, the love triangle, Sharon, Phil, and Grant. Peggy comes in and basically makes it her aim to get the pub, kick Sharon out the square, and basically rule the roost.
Yeah, I mean, delivered Peggy's first slap within the first, week or so of her being on screen, was it? It wasn't long before. I think Sharon got her first slap, didn't she? And I mean, that clip of just instantly you knew not to mess with Peggy. Peggy was someone that even Sharon wasn't going to mess with. And she was Sharon brought the Mitchell brothers to their knees. These two burly lads, the whole square was terrified of, and who got such a reputation about them in the short time that they'd been on screen. And this little woman walks on, and instantly the Mitchell brothers become like little boys. That's a presence. God almighty, that's a presence.
Yeah, she just instantly knew how to tame them and to control them, but not in a nasty way, in a very motherly manner. Making sure that the Mitchells were respected and to be feared again. And that's what a Peggy Mitchell does.
I mean, I've just got that brilliant memory of Grant telling Peggy what had been going on with Sharon, and Phil is summoned to the Vic.
Yeah.
Goes upstairs, and the first thing he gets is a slap round the head from Peggy. You dirty little sod! I loved it. It was brilliant.
I mean, Peggy's slaps were almost as notorious as, like you're saying, the line of "Get out of my pub." Her slaps.
You felt some of those slaps, didn't you?
You really did.
I remember. Who is it? Carla? Was it Carla Mitchell that she slapped? There's a clip where Peggy slaps her, and then Billy opens an ice bucket, and she puts her hand into the ice bucket afterwards. Billy says, "Even I felt that one, Peg." Do you remember the clip I mean? And that slap looked painful. I don't know if it was real, but I don't imagine that a lot of the Peggy slaps were an easy thing to receive.
These were full-on dry slaps, These are the ones that Peggy could hand out and
jumping up into the air to deliver them as hard as she could.
I mean, I think everyone remembers the huge slap of Pat and Frank when the love triangle was exposed on fireworks night, and she shouts "Good night" and leaves the pub.
Thanks for the fireworks. Yeah.
And that slap, I mean, and Pam St. Clement, I swear, still has that feeling on her cheek to this day. She
says to put her jaw back into place, I think she said. And then, of course, there's the slaps, which, talking of slapping Pat, is the iconic two-hander between her and Pat, when Roy and Frank have driven off somewhere, and it's a pair of them just talking about Frank and the relationship that they both have with Frank, ending in the iconic "You bitch, you cow" slap for the first time. I remember watching that as a kid when it first went out, and just, you know, how fascinated are kids by TV drama? I can't have been any more than about 6 or 7. I remember just being utterly captivated by the whole thing. I'm just watching Pam St. Clement and Barbara Windsor just delivering these amazing performances on screen, and just being totally addicted to EastEnders from that moment, even as a small kid. So it's in no small part to Barbara Windsor that I'm sat here talking about her on a podcast now. Just incredible.
The chemistry between Pat and Peggy was brilliant.
Amazing.
I mean, they started off enemies through and through, and it's just this friendship developed as time went on between them. And again, it was allowed to nurture, it was allowed to grow between them. It was such a wonderful chemistry, this duo. They worked so well together. The writers saw it, the producers saw it. They kept giving them stories together. When they threw in Frank's funeral, that lovely scene when they're upstairs making the sandwiches, and they're both constantly trying to one-up one another about who Frank loved the most. And of course the scene when they're in the ice cream van and they get themselves a little bit too drunk. There's so many scenes, almost too many to mention, between Peggy and Pat. Is there any scenes that I'm missing out that you loved between them, as well as the original You Bitch You Cow?
I mean, of course, when Peggy died and Pat came back for her was incredible. And they managed to get one last "You Bitch You Cow" in before Peggy died, and it just completely and utterly captured the friendship between the two of them. You could just see it between the two actors, and I think it's very obvious how well Pam and Barbara got on behind the camera.
Yeah.
Because you don't have that kind of chemistry on screen unless you've got that kind of chemistry in real life, I don't think. There's been enough interviews with Barbara and Pam over the years, including the Back to Ours episode that they did around the 30th.
Oh, I love that, and I think it is on iPlayer. I recommend strong. If it's not on iPlayer, it must be somewhere to watch.
It's certainly on YouTube, because I watched it fairly recently. And you've just got these, well, in Barbara's own words, two old birds discussing an incredible career between the two of them, and just talking and bringing their own experiences to the show, and you can tell, like that level of actress is something that's so rare these days, and you don't get it as much as we should nowadays. Just amazing. I mean, so many countless scenes of Peggy. What have you got? Could you name a favourite Peggy scene?
With Peggy, you've got to separate them into some wonderful dramatic moments and then some wonderful camp moments. And sometimes you get that special occasion when you have the camp and the dramatic all combined into one. And for me, I love the scene when Phil burns down the Vic and you see Peggy strutting out into the Vic, ringing the bell,
giving a Joan of Arc.
Yeah, telling everyone to get out. And then when they're all outside and everyone's been saved from inside, and Peggy is outside the pub looking at it and saying, let it burn, and it's, oh my gosh, it's a wonderful scene. And like I say, it's just the right amount of camp, just the right amount of drama, and it's done so perfectly. And I don't know, Peggy isn't the tallest lady in the world, but she acts as if she's 7 foot tall. She's just fantastic. And with a scene like that, when you just see her almost give in, that she's had it, this was the end of her, she just couldn't fight it anymore, and that was basically the end. I think that was her first exit.
And I remember watching that, and you can see once the pub's done the classic sort of final big explosion of a fire episode outside, and Peggy's been thrown to the ground, and then she stands up, and you can just see it in her eyes. She is just looking, and I think there was probably quite a lot of Barbara in there as well. Yeah, because of how attached she was to the show. And it broke her heart to leave as much as it did the viewers. I think you could just see her looking up at this burning pub that meant so much to both Peggy and Barbara, and you could see it. You could see the devastation in her eyes. She was just incredible. And like you say, the final "Let It Burn," where Barbara says that she gave it a Joan of Arc. And she was so self-deprecating with that sort of thing as well, didn't she? Like she knew she could act. She knew she was good at it, but there was no arrogance there, I don't think.
No, not at all. I like to say modest. She knew her ability, but she wouldn't show off about it, and she was so quick also to share her scenes with people as well. She would never want to steal a scene, never stole any scenes. It was always a group effort. It was always being able to work with others, and she would welcome new cast in. When they did the interviews on Secret on the Squares this year, Natalie Cassidy said that she was taken to one side by Barbara Windsor and told, you need to pull your socks up a little bit, you need to do a little bit better, you need to stop messing around and kind of do a bit better. And she took that on board because it's Barbara Windsor. She's iconic. iconic.
You
You
took it,
listen
and
to
God
that.
forbid you didn't know your lines when Barbara Windsor was on set.
That's right. Because Barbara Windsor was a professional. She came in, did her work, and she expected it from everyone else.
Yeah.
Just wonderful, wonderful. I was never lucky to meet Barbara Windsor, but having heard some of the stories I hear about her, I truly wish I had. She sounds like a beautiful woman.
And what a woman to write for as well. Can you imagine the opportunity to write a Peggy scene?
Yeah.
You know, if you worked for the show and you were given the opportunity to actually put lines in Barbara Windsor's mouth and just watch those lines go out and said by such a professional. You know, I think my favourite Peggy scene is when I think it's the day that Archie dies, and she goes into the Vic and she confronts Archie for the last time, and it's when we get the iconic line of, "You don't mess with me, I'm real East End proper, I'm Peggy Mitchell." You know, just an incredible line that just captures Peggy's roughness and Peggy's determination never to let anybody beat her. She could be faced with anybody and Peggy would not go down without a fight. And that just the way that she delivers it sends shivers down your spine. You believe that Archie hasn't got a chance, and Archie seems one of the most evil people that Square's ever seen, and you think, nah, you've got no chance against Peggy.
That's it. She gave out this very threatening behaviour, and you were on board. You wanted it. You rode that Peggy train when she gave it out to people. There's a moment where Barbara Windsor was very open to say that she was very upset that she was given a part, which is when she was very cruel toward Mark Fowler when it was discovered that he had AIDS. She got a lot of flack from especially the LGBT community because her character was very nasty toward Mark. It started a campaign to stop people from buying fruit and veg from his stall.
Barbara's spoken about that scene and said that as a result, Danny LaRue was having fights with gay people on Blackpool Pier. Which, I mean, how many people could say that for a start?
Wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, that scene was, you know, Peggy was, as an amazing a character as Peggy was, you know, like you say, Peggy wasn't perfect. And I think that, especially during the 90s, there was a huge amount of ignorance towards that sort of thing. And Peggy was the perfect character to give those opinions to. Someone who wasn't afraid to voice what she thought. If you've got to wear those sorts of opinions, who else would you give it to? Apart from somebody as gobby as Peggy.
Yeah, entirely. She had her flaws. And again, this is how a well-built character is made. And I wonder how much influence Barbara Windsor had toward the character building she had for Peggy.
I don't imagine that she would ever let Peggy go to a place that she didn't think was right for Peggy. Not right for Barbara, but right for Peggy. And that's a very fine line. You know, you've seen enough clips of Barbara behind the scenes to know that she would go to costume and probably be in there for hours deciding what Peggy would be wearing that day. And nobody knew the character better than Peggy, you know, because she was the one that would go home and study these lines and study this character and know the history of Peggy and know absolutely everything about her, because that's the sort of actress that she was. And it's thanks to her that Peggy became such an icon and became such a true character, because you cannot play these people without knowing that much about them.
Absolutely. It's just so lovely to think back about how this character was born, how this character developed, how this character had died on screen, and just having every single one of the memories that I have for her is perfect. It's just perfect. I genuinely cannot think of a moment where I watched Peggy Mitchell on screen and I watched Barbara Windsor portray her and I thought to myself, oh, I'm done, or I've had enough. It never happened. She was just a constant joy to be on screen. And I mean, she was a pull of the show too. Audience would follow her. When she had her first break, there was a real dip in the audience. She came back, the ratings grew again. And it just shows the pulling power of what Barbara Windsor, despite her first conceptions of fear, had created for herself in this East End world.
Yeah, and she would go on, shows, on chat shows, and talk about how she felt the show was doing at the time, whether she was in it or not. I remember she went on This Morning once and was saying, the show's in a bit of a state at the moment, you were like, you could just imagine the EastEnders bosses going, oh God, Barbara, please stop. And you know what? She wouldn't, because she cared about that show more than any of us put together. You know, she wanted that show, even when she wasn't in a scene or wasn't even in the show, she wanted the EastEnders to be at the top of its game at all times, because she knew that it could be. And again, a sign of how modest she was, that she knew that the show could go on without her. She knew that the show could go on without Peggy, but she wanted the show to be as good as it can be. You know, and there's so many stories of her taking cast members, like you say, taking cast members aside and telling people what she thought and making it all as good as she could get it. And it still shows, and the show misses her, and the show will continue to miss her for a long time. And yeah, just an amazing character and actress.
I actually want to read out a tweet that Letitia Dean had. Actually, I think it was on her Instagram, had posted, because I think it's just such a wonderful thing that Letitia Dean had wrote. And I'm just going to read it out now. It says, I would like to say what an utterly heartbreaking news I woke up to this morning. They broke the mould when they made Dame Barbara Windsor. There will never be another like that incredible woman. Everyone who met her loved her, and she will be deeply missed. I would like to send everything I have to her amazing husband, Scott. What a beautiful soul he is. My heart goes out to him, and I just wish I could give him the biggest cuddle he has ever had. Rest in peace, dearest Barbara. You will be missed beyond measure. We must remember that Barbara Windsor, despite her illness, she carried on fundraising. She carried on getting in the public eye about dementia, about Alzheimer's. She was raising money directly and indirectly. She spoke to the Prime Minister. She visited him while she was, very unwell, very ill, and carried on and made him promise that he would invest in more science into looking into Alzheimer's and dementia. We have to remember that it is the number one killer in the UK. The efforts that Barbara Windsor and her husband had put into the awareness, it's a credit to her, an absolute credit to her. You can find more information about Barbara Windsor's charity by going to Alzheimer's, that's alzheimers.org.uk. You can also go there to donate any amount that you can.
Yeah, and after that, she turned around to Boris Johnson and went, right, kiss a kiss. She said, that's the Prime Minister. What a woman.
But who else could get away with that other than Barbara Windsor?
Who else could? Exactly. I bet he did as well.
Oh, I mean, if Barbara Windsor asked me to give her a kiss, I would slap one right on her.
All day long.
Yeah,
all day long.
Entirely.
Bless her.
So I asked for people to get in touch with us to let us know their memories of Barbara Windsor. At PeteBill7 said, such amazing acting behind the bar when she revealed the Frank and Pat affair, from anger to barely holding back the tears. Yeah, I do love that scene.
That scene is incredible. That scene really is amazing. And the monologue as well. It's a long old monologue. If you watch the full scene, that's a long old monologue that she delivers for that scene, and she absolutely nails every word of it.
An absolute professional from beginning to end.
I'm going to have to watch a few of these scenes before the day is out, I think.
Joshua Hayward got in touch with us on email. And I never got to meet Barbara, but I always loved writing to her. Her replies to me were so warming and generous. Watching Classic EastEnders is going to just remind us of her every day and how talented and amazing she truly was. Rest in peace, Babs. I must say, Josh is Cast Cards on Twitter and on Instagram, and basically he writes to all the actors of EastEnders, past and present, and he gets replies to them. He obviously must get some wonderful letters from Barbara Windsor, and if you're listening, Josh, we'd love to see them. If you felt right to, I'd love to see them online and see what she wrote back to you, because I bet there were some beautiful words.
She loved the fans as well, though, didn't she? Like, she would I don't think there was ever there's no stories of how she never had time for a fan that would come up to her, because I think she saw it as a responsibility to be nice to the fans, and to be kind to the people that made her, in her eyes, what she was. She loved being a face of the people, and she loved people getting in touch with her. I don't think she was ever tired of that.
No, absolutely right. As I said at the top of the show, she warmed up a room. She warmed up any scene. She just a wonderful icon. One last comment from @DarkGar2 said, I'm gutted. As someone who's grown up with the Peggy era of EastEnders, I have to say that Barbara truly owned the role. She made the show her own. She was truly iconic, and she always will be. I will miss her so very much. Yeah, I mean... Yeah. It's echoing the sentiment, isn't it? She's just going to be missed desperately, and a world without Barbara Windsor feels very empty indeed, especially in 2020 when you don't really want
God knows
more
we need it. God knows we need it this year.
Yeah.
I think to any of the cast and crew that might be listening to this at the moment, we at Walford Weekly obviously pass on our sincerest condolences, because we know that this must be an extremely tough day for everyone at EastEnders today, and obviously to our husband Scott. And all we can really say at this point is to rest in peace, our true Queen of the Vic, the Duchess. And thanks for all the laughs, and thanks for all the incredible moments that you brought to us over the years.
I second that entirely. Thank you for everyone for listening. Take care of one another, and we'll be back again very soon.
Well, what do you reckon?
Not bad for a bottle blonde.
Oh, you bitch!
You cow.
My friend. Oh, my dear friend. You won't never leave me, will you?
No, sweetheart. Not for one single second.